A king stands on his staff. His eyes are open, his hand grips the wood, but there is no breath in his chest. Around him, jinn labor in silence, lifting stone, pouring molten copper, building monuments for a master who is already gone. Days pass, weeks, months. Not one of them dares to look into his face. Then a termite finds the wood, the staff cracks, the body falls. How did the mightiest ruler on earth die, and no one in his kingdom knew? To understand, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before Sulaiman, there was his father. Prophet Dawud alayhi salam ruled the land of Israel with a justice so deep that the earth itself responded to him. When he recited the Zabur, the mountains echoed his voice, not as an echo, but as an answer. The birds descended from their flights to sit near him, drawn by the sound. And in his hands, iron, cold, stubborn, unyielding iron became soft as dough. He shaped it without fire, forging shields and armor with his bare hands. This was not just a king. This was a man whom Allah had given a gift no other ruler had ever received, a voice that made creation worship alongside him. But even with all of this, Dawud was not a king who sat idle. He worked. On the days he fasted, and his fasting was legendary, one day on, one day off, the most beloved pattern of worship to Allah. He still labored at his forge. He sweated through the psalms and hammered through the prayers. His palace was not a place of luxury, it was a workshop. A man who ruled an entire nation, and yet the sparks from his iron flew as if he were a common blacksmith. That was the standard Sulaiman was born into. And then one day, a case came before the court that would reveal something extraordinary about the boy. Two men stood before Prophet Dawud, one a farmer, the other a shepherd. The shepherd's flock had wandered into the farmer's vineyard at night and devoured the entire crop. The vines were destroyed. The harvest was lost. The farmer wanted justice. Dawud listened carefully and ruled. The sheep should be given to the farmer as compensation. A fair ruling, a king's ruling. But young Sulaiman, sitting beside his father listening, spoke.
What if, instead of giving the sheep permanently, we give their wool and milk to the farmer until his vineyard grows back? Then the sheep return to the shepherd, and neither man loses everything.
Dawud paused. It was a better ruling. The Quran records it plainly, and we made Sulaiman to understand the matter. The father had judged fairly, the son had judged wisely. Most people think wisdom comes with age. They believe you earn it by growing old, by accumulating experience, by making mistakes over decades. But the Quran tells us something far more extraordinary here. It tells us that wisdom is not an achievement. It is a gift. Allah chose to give the sharper understanding to the boy, not the king. Not because Dawud failed, but because Sulaiman was being prepared for something no human had ever carried before. And what came next would make even the angels marvel. Sulaiman inherited the throne. He inherited the kingdom, the armies, the majesty. But he also inherited something his father never had.
O people, we have been taught the language of birds, and we have been given from all things. Indeed, this is the evident bounty.
Let those words settle. The language of birds, not just the ability to command them. The ability to understand them, to hear what they were saying. To know what the ants whispered to each other beneath the earth. To give orders to the jinn, beings of smokeless fire that no human eye could see, and have them obey. Allah had given one man authority over 3 separate kingdoms. Human, jinn, and animal. He could command the wind itself, a month's journey in the morning, a month's journey in the evening. He could travel his empire on air. No king before him had been given this. No king after him would be given this. He had asked Allah for a kingdom unlike any other, and it was granted. But notice his very first public words. He does not say, "I have been given power." He says this is the evident bounty. The Arabic word is fadl, gift, grace, something given to you that you did not earn. He called his power a gift. And centuries later, this same kingdom would keep running long after his heart stopped. His empire would continue functioning without him for months. The jinn would labor, the birds would fly their roots, and not a single creature in his vast dominion would realize their king was already dead. But that chapter comes later. For now, the boy who solved a farm dispute had just become the ruler of men, jinn, and birds. And his first great test was already marching toward him. Picture it, an army stretching to the horizon in every direction. But this is not a human army, not only at least. 3 columns move across the land in perfect formation. The first human soldiers, armored and disciplined, their boots shaking the ground like a slow drum roll. The second, jinn, beings of smokeless fire, invisible to all but Sulaiman, marching in rows as orderly as the men beside them. And the third column is not on the ground at all, it is in the sky. Birds, thousands of them, tens of thousands, flying in formations so dense that the sunlight dims beneath their wings. The Quran describes this precisely. And gathered for Sulaiman were his soldiers of jinn and men and birds, and they were set in order. Set in order. The Arabic is yuzaun. Held in formation, arranged, disciplined. This is not chaos unleashed, this is power under control. And that is what separates Sulaiman from every tyrant who ever lived. He does not let raw power run wild. The jinn are immensely powerful. They can lift mountains, dive into oceans, but they march in rank. The birds are free creatures, born for open sky, but they fly in formation. Power without order is destruction. Sulaiman commands not by fear alone, but by structure. It was the most powerful army the world had ever seen. And it was about to be stopped by someone smaller than a grain of wheat. The army reaches a valley, Wadi al-Naml, the Valley of the Ants. Down in the dirt, invisible to the soldiers above, an ant stands at the edge of her colony. She watches the shadow creep across the land, the slow eclipse of the approaching army. The ground trembles. The vibration of thousands of feet grows louder, closer. She does not run. She turns to face her colony and shouts, not panic, command, clear, urgent, protective.
"Oh, ants, enter your dwelling so that Sulaiman and his soldiers do not crush you while they do not perceive."
She says, do not perceive. She does not accuse the king of cruelty. She does not call the army evil. She understands that they are simply too powerful to notice her, too large to see what is small. And so she warns not with blame but with practicality. Get inside, hide, they will not even know they have crushed you. She remains at the entrance until the last ant has filed inside. An ant, a creature so small you can crush it without noticing, has dialogue in the Quran. She has a voice. She has concern for her people. She is not nameless. She is not decoration. Her words are preserved in the Book of Allah, recited in mosques around the world 14 centuries later. How many kings have had their speeches forgotten? And yet this ant's warning survives unchanged. And then, high above on his throne carried by the wind, Sulaiman hears her, every word. He does not laugh. He does not mock her. The Quran says he smiled, tabassamun, a gentle, warm smile. Not amusement at her expense, but amusement at the beauty of it. A creature so small, caring so deeply, a voice so quiet, carrying so far. And then, instead of marching forward, he prays,
My Lord, enable me to be grateful for your favor, which you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents, and to do righteousness of which you approve.
He does not thank Allah for his army. He does not thank him for his power. He thanks him for the ability to be grateful at all. Because Sulaiman understands something that most of us never learn. The most dangerous moment is not when you lose power, it is when you have it. And the king who commands everything is terrified, not of losing his kingdom, but of losing his gratitude. Because the moment he stops thanking Allah, he has lost everything. He could have kept marching. No one would have blamed him. The ant herself expected him to crush them unknowingly. His soldiers would not have noticed, his jinn would not have cared. And yet he stopped his entire army, men, jinn, and birds, and rerouted them around a colony of ants. That is not weakness. That is the most absolute form of power, the kind that chooses when to stop. But the gentleness did not mean softness. Sulaiman could be tender with ants and ruthless with discipline, because true authority requires both. Back in his camp, Sulaiman inspects his birds. It is not a casual glance. He knows them individually. Each species, each position, each assigned role. The hoopoe, a small bird with a distinctive crest, serves as a scout, responsible for finding water sources, critical intelligence for a marching army. Every bird is present and accounted for, except one. The hoopoe is gone. Sulaiman's face hardens. A single bird missing from formation is not a trivial matter. It is a breach, and in a kingdom where even jinn march in order, a breach cannot go unanswered.
Why do I not see the hoopoe? Or is he among the absent?
The court falls silent.
I will surely punish him with a severe punishment, or I will surely slaughter him, unless he brings me a clear authorization.
The king, who just stopped an army for ants, is now threatening to execute a bird. But this is not cruelty, this is the other face of authority. Sulaiman is establishing that even in a kingdom of wonders, discipline matters. If the smallest member can vanish without consequence, the entire system has no order. Mercy without boundaries is not mercy, it is indulgence. But the hoopoe was not running away. He was running toward a discovery that would change everything. The bird lands before the throne, small, dusty, exhausted from long flight. It does not cower, it does not apologize weakly. It opens its report with a line that should stop you in your tracks.
I have encompassed what you have not encompassed.
A hoopoe, a tiny bird with a curved beak and a spotted crest. And it is telling the king who commanded everything, there is something I know that you do not. And it is right.
I have come to you from Sheba with certain news. I found a woman ruling over them, and she has been given of all things, and she has a great throne. I found her and her people prostrating to the sun instead of Allah.
A bird delivering geopolitical intelligence. It has flown across hundreds of miles of desert, identified a previously unknown kingdom, noted its ruler is female, catalogued her wealth, described her great throne, and is now adding theological commentary. The hoopoe does not just describe what it saw. It asks a question. Why do they not prostrate to Allah, who brings forth what is hidden in the heavens and earth? A bird with more theological clarity than entire civilizations. The line between disobedience and initiative is razor thin. The hoopoe had gone beyond its orders, absent without permission. But it returned with intelligence that would reshape the entire trajectory of Sulaiman's reign. Sometimes the scout who breaks formation discovers what the general never would have found. A queen who worshipped the sun, a kingdom that had everything except the truth. Sulaiman had heard enough. Sulaiman composed a letter. He did not open with his name. He did not list his titles. King of Israel, commander of jinn, ruler of the wind. He did not threaten invasion or demand tribute. He began his message with 5 words.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. And then,
be not arrogant toward me, but come to me in submission.
that was the entire letter. No army, no ultimatum, just an invitation. He introduced himself not with power, but with God. This is not a letter of conquest. This is dawah. And the difference between those two things is the difference between Sulaiman and every other king in history. And who did he entrust to carry this letter across hundreds of miles of desert? The hoopoe, the same bird he had nearly executed for being absent. The bird that proved itself through initiative was now promoted to the most important diplomatic mission in the kingdom's history. Sulaiman does not hold grudges, he recognizes competence. The bird that was nearly slaughtered is now the royal messenger. That is leadership. Punish disobedience. Then reward proven initiative. The letter arrived in the court of Queen Bilqis. She read it aloud to her advisors, and the room erupted. Her generals leaned forward.
We are people of strength and great military might. The decision is yours. Command us as you see fit.
They wanted war. They wanted to ride north and crush whoever dared send such a letter. But Bilqis was smarter than war.
When kings enter a city, they ruin it and render the honor of its people humbled, and thus do they do.
The Quran does not present this woman as a villain. She is not foolish. She is a leader who consults her people, weighs military options against diplomatic ones, and chooses the path that protects her nation. Her generals offer swords, she offers patience.
I will send to them a gift and see with what the messengers return.
She was running a test. Send treasure. If the man can be bought, he is a king. Negotiate. If he cannot, he is something else. She could have listened to her generals. She could have mustered her army. Instead, she chose intelligence over pride. She chose to learn before she fought. And that choice is what makes her worthy of what comes later. The envoy arrived in Sulaiman's court carrying the treasure of Sheba. Gold plates, gemstones that caught the light like captured stars, bolts of silk so fine they slipped through fingers. This was a queen's opening bid, lavish enough to flatter any king, expensive enough to buy any alliance. The envoy held out the gifts and watched Sulaiman's face. Nothing changed. Not a flicker of desire, not a moment of hesitation. Not even a glance that lingered too long. Sulaiman looked at the treasure the way a man looks at sand, common, unremarkable, beneath attention.
Do you provide me with wealth? What Allah has given me is better than what He has given you. Rather, it is you who rejoice in your gift.
He did not pause to admire. He did not consult advisors. He did not weigh options. The envoy's hands lowered slowly. He knew before the second sentence that the gifts had failed.
Return to them, for we will surely come to them with soldiers that they will be powerless to encounter. And we will surely expel them from there in humiliation while they are debased.
The envoy turned and left. He would return to Sheba with the knowledge that Sulaiman cannot be moved by material wealth. A king who wants nothing from you is a king you cannot negotiate with. Bilqis's test had returned its answer, and the answer terrified her more than any army would have. And now Sulaiman turned to his court and posed a question. That would produce the single most astonishing moment in his entire reign.
Which of you can bring me her throne before they come to me in submission?
Not a chair, not a replica. Her actual throne, the physical seat of the Queen of Sheba, located hundreds of miles away. The Ifrit stepped forward first. He was enormous, a jinn of immense power, a creature of smokeless fire, ancient and terrifying. His voice rumbled through the court like distant thunder.
I will bring it to you before you rise from your place. And indeed, I am for it, strong and trustworthy.
The offer was staggering. The time it takes a king to stand from his throne, perhaps 30 seconds. And the Ifrit promised to cross hundreds of miles of desert and return carrying a massive royal throne. But then another figure spoke, quieter, calmer. Scholars of Tafsir identify him as Asif ibn Barkia, a man described in the Quran as having knowledge from the scripture. He does not step forward dramatically. He does not raise his voice. He simply says,
I will bring it to you before your glance returns to you.
before your glance returns to you, before the blink of an eye, and before anyone in the court could process what he had said. The throne was there, Bilqis's royal seat, massive, ornate, transported across hundreds of miles in less time than it takes a human eye to close and open again. The Ifrit represents raw power, Asif represents knowledge. And in Sulaiman's court, and in the Quran's theology, knowledge wins every single time. The brute force of a jinn is eclipsed by the quiet certainty of a man who knows the scripture. That is the hierarchy Allah established, not strength over wisdom, but wisdom over strength. And then Sulaiman looked at the throne. He looked at this impossible object, this miracle of transportation. This proof that the laws of space mean nothing before divine permission. And he said,
This is from the favor of my Lord to test me whether I will be grateful or ungrateful.
Test. He calls the greatest miracle of his life a test, not a reward, not a sign of his greatness, a test. Because Sulaiman knows something that most people never learn. The more Allah gives you, the more you are being watched. Power is not a prize, it is an examination. And the question is never how much can you do. The question is always, will you still remember who gave it to you? He ordered the throne disguised, altered just enough to be familiar, but not quite recognizable. Bilqis was on her way, and the real test was about to begin. Bilqis arrived in Jerusalem. She had traveled across deserts and mountains to meet the king whose letter refused to bow, whose treasury refused gifts, whose power, if the rumors were true, extended beyond the realm of men. She had prepared herself for everything, for armies, for intimidation, for a show of force designed to make her kneel. What she found was stranger than any of it. She was led before a throne, her throne or something very like it. It had been altered, disguised, shifted just enough to be unsettling. When asked, "Is your throne like this?" she studied it carefully.
It is as though it were it.
Not yes, not no, as though Bilqis was not a woman who could be trapped into a simple answer. She recognized something familiar, the proportions, the carvings, the weight of it. But she hedged. She would not commit to an absolute statement when something felt wrong. She was cautious even when she was outmatched, and that caution is exactly what makes what comes next so powerful. If Bilqis were foolish, her surrender would mean nothing. If she were reckless, her submission would be weakness. But she is neither. She is intelligent. She is sovereign. She tests before she trusts. And that is why, when she finally breaks open, it shatters. She would not be fooled by a throne. But Sulaiman did not need to fool her. He needed to show her something she had never seen. Enter the palace. Bilqis stepped inside, and there it was, a vast expanse of crystal clear water. It stretched across the entire floor of the hall, shimmering under the light that poured through the high windows. She could see into it, deep, translucent, alive with the play of light. Instinctively, she reached down and lifted her garment. She raised her skirt above her shins, preparing to wade through what she knew was water. What she could see was water. What every sense in her body told her was water. Her foot touched the surface, solid. It was glass. A floor, vast, flawless, polished to such perfection that it was indistinguishable from a pool of clear water. She was standing on solid ground, her garment lifted for nothing, her certainty shattered in a single step.
Indeed, it is a palace made smooth with glass.
And in that moment, the entire theology of Bilqis's life collapsed. She was a woman who worshipped the sun because she could see it. Her God was visible, tangible. It rose every morning and set every evening. It was a God of surfaces, of what the eyes confirm. And now a floor, a surface, had deceived her. She who trusted her eyes had been fooled by glass. She who worshipped what she could see had been undone by what she could see through. No argument, no debate, no sword, no army, no scholar presenting evidence. Just architecture. A floor that looked like water, a surface that was transparent, and a queen who realized, standing on that glass, that everything she believed about the visible world was wrong. If what you can see deceives you, then what about what you cannot see? What of the sun she worships? How much of what she thought was real was simply another transparent surface? Bilqis lowered her garment. She did not argue. She did not negotiate. She did not ask for conditions or time, or a council meeting. The queen who had overruled her generals, who had sent gifts instead of armies, who had hedged even in the identification of her own throne, this woman, who never committed to anything without careful thought, spoke the most absolute words of her life.
My lord, I have wronged myself, and I submit with Sulaiman to Allah, Lord of all the worlds.
Rab al-Alamin, Lord of all the worlds. Not Lord of one nation, not Lord of one son, Lord of everything. No army had invaded Sheba, no ultimatum had been enforced, no city had been burned. A queen walked into a palace, was deceived by a floor and surrendered to the truth. Through transparency, literally, transparent glass. Through signs, not swords. And the woman who submitted was not weak. She was one of the most powerful, intelligent, strategic leaders in the ancient world. Her submission is not a defeat, it is a recognition. Generations later, the people of Sheba would turn away from what Bilqis had embraced. They would forget gratitude. They would be punished with the flood of the dam, Sail Alarim, and the gardens she had nurtured would produce only bitter fruit. What Bilqis chose to build, her distant descendants chose to abandon. But that is their story. Hers ended here, standing on glass, speaking to Allah, choosing truth over sovereignty. But there is a part of Sulaiman's story that most people forget. A chapter that came before the ants, before the hoopoe, before the glass floor. A chapter about failure. Sulaiman once sat reviewing his horses. They were magnificent creatures. Safiyat al-Jiyad, the Quran calls them, thoroughbreds of the finest breed. Trained for war, gleaming in the late afternoon light. They pranced before him one by one, muscles rippling, hooves striking the earth like hammered drums. He watched them, and he kept watching. The sun moved across the sky, the shadows stretched, and the time for Asr prayer came and went. When he realized what had happened, the devastation was immediate. He had been so absorbed in something beautiful that he had forgotten the one who made beauty possible. A man who speaks to birds and commands the wind had been distracted by horses.
Indeed, I gave preference to the love of good things over the remembrance of my Lord. Until the sun disappeared behind the curtain of night.
And then he did something that reveals the deepest truth about who he was.
Return them to me.
The horses were brought back, and Sulaiman sacrificed them. He gave away or destroyed, the scholars differ, the very things that had pulled his attention from Allah. He did not say, "I will be more careful next time." He did not create a system of reminders, he eliminated it. If the most beautiful thing in your life stands between you and Allah, it goes. No compromise, no negotiation. That is tawbah at its most radical, not just saying sorry, but removing the cause. And now we return to the beginning, to the image you saw in the first moment of this story. A king on his staff. Sulaiman stands in his throne room, staff in hand, overseeing the jinn as they labor. They lift stone, they pour molten copper, they dive into the depths of the sea to retrieve treasures. His empire stretches in every direction, maintained by creatures who fear him too much to rest. But there is no heartbeat in his chest. Sulaiman is dead, his soul has departed, and his body remains upright, held by nothing more than a wooden staff and the rigidity of death. His eyes are open, his hand grips the wood. His robes hang still in the airless room, and the jinn keep working. They do not approach, they do not check. For all their power, for all their ability to transport thrones across continents in a blink, they cannot perceive what is happening 3 feet in front of them. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass. The dust gathers on his robes, cobwebs form on his staff. The light never changes in his eyes because there is no light left. And still they build, until a termite, the smallest, most insignificant creature Allah has made, finds the wood of the staff. It begins to eat, slowly, patiently, fiber by fiber. The wood weakens, the balance shifts, and then, without warning, the staff cracks, the body falls, and the jinns stop. The Quran says, "When we decreed for him death, nothing indicated to them his death except a creature of the earth eating his staff." So when he collapsed, the jinn realized that if they had known the unseen, they would not have remained in humiliating labor. If they had known the unseen, but they did not. The creatures who could carry thrones across oceans could not see death standing in front of them. And a termite, Dabat Allard, creature of the earth, did what all their power could not. It revealed the truth. No one knows the unseen. Not the jinn, not the powerful, not the kings, only Allah. If you were given what Sulaiman was given, the wind, the jinn, the language of every creature that walks or flies, what would you do with it? The pattern of his life is relentless. Every gift leads to a prayer. Every miracle leads to humility. The ant made him smile, and he prayed. The throne appeared, and he called it a test. The horses distracted him, and he destroyed them. He once asked Allah,
My Lord, forgive me and grant me a kingdom such as will not belong to anyone after me.
And it was granted. No king since has commanded jinn and wind and animals. That prayer was answered permanently. But the lesson is not be like Sulaiman. The lesson is far simpler and far harder. Whatever kingdom you have, however small, are you grateful for it? That is the legacy of Sulaiman. Not the palaces, not the armies, the gratitude. But before Sulaiman, before Dawud, before every prophet who ever walked the earth, there was the very first, a being shaped from clay, molded by the hands of Allah himself. Angels were commanded to bow, and every angel in existence obeyed, except one. He refused. He had a reason, and that reason would poison the story of humanity for the rest of time. The first creation, the first command, the first disobedience, the first murder, and the very first moment a human being turned to Allah and asked for forgiveness. This is the story of Prophet Adam, alayhi salam. Stay tuned. See you in the next episode, inshallah.